see all of a sudden my arms shot up out of the water, and I grabbed a hold of this rock, probably like 6 or 8 feet ahead of, like above me, or like 6 feet, to the side of the river, whatever. High as I could, I grabbed it and I pulled my entire body up, flipped onto the rock on my back. And then they finally met there. And then they said I stood up and started talking to them. Well, and that's the part where I came to and started realizing what was happening. And at that moment, I wasn't fearful. I have no memory of it. I have no like retro, like if I think about it abstractly, I can have fear for it. But my soma doesn't feel anything bad. In fact, I'm really grateful to my physicality and my body for saving my life that day. I'm like thinking to myself, wow, even when I'm unconscious, there's a part of me that has resilience. There's a part of me that's tapped into the physical world to save my life, because I should have probably died that day. Like, it was a really bad situation. And in a lot of cases, somebody could have died. A lot of people die in that river all the time. It's like class 3 or 4 rapids. Like, it's a really dangerous river. And it just so happened that I didn't pass away that day, but I probably should have. So I kind of had this moment like, wow, I really clearly need to be more careful and not as cavalier as I am, like Enneagram self-pres repressed type behavior. I need to be more careful. But also it showed me that, man, I have some inner resilience physically I didn't even know about. And that's really powerful in my life. Like, that's something I should really be honoring or thinking about and tuning into more. So today, we're going to be tuning into the ESFP personality type. We're going to be going to a clip from our most recent podcast about the ESFP personality type. The episode title is How to Love Yourself as an ESFP. We're doing a series of all the 16 types. This is the first one we're doing. This week, we're going to tune into that, and we're going to talk about the ESFP themselves, how they can love themselves. But what can we learn if you're not ESFPs? What's a takeaway from that? And one of the things is this idea of resilience. It's this idea of tuning into the resilience. So today on the Quest membership, we're going to open up the concept of resilience. We're going to talk about this. And we're going to look to the ESFP personality type to learn about resilience for ourselves in our lives. So, sorry, Jonathan, I went right into my story because your feed got dropped. I don't know what happened.
I'm terrible. I just pressed buttons and I closed myself out of the call.
Oh.
I'm sorry. It happens sometimes.
No worries. Well, I was letting Quest members in like 15 minutes ago by accident. Like, I'm like button happy. Like, I'm like, oh, you guys totally be here. We're just getting set up for the day. I understand. Have you ever had a near-death experience that's taught you resilience? Either of you?
I got the one story I do remember. It wasn't my death, but my back before there were child labor laws, my dad had me and my brother working on sheet metal roofing. And it was very cold, 30 degrees that day. So everything was slick. And if you know anything about sheet metal roofing, it's always coated in diesel to keep the metal preserved until it comes time to put it on the roof. And me and my brother were on the ground, and one of the sheet metal slides slid down the roof and was going towards my brother. And I remember in that moment, I didn't think, I just reacted instantly. I jumped on top of him like a tackle, and the sheet metal went above our heads and then stuck into the ground like an arrow. And we just got back and started working again, just carried on as usual. But now that I'm an adult, I remember thinking like, wow, that was really intense, but I didn't think about it. I just instantly responded in the moment. So
yeah, there's it's nice to know that everything is working together to preserve us in our really vulnerable times. I think it's part of why it's so hard to kill something, right? It's like hard to kill someone. It really is. It's legitimately very difficult to kill a person unless you've got like a tool that does it simply, right? But like we just won't go down without a fight. And that means even if we're in situations we put ourselves in, right? I think my only near-death experience was in a car. So, that's a little bit different. That's one of those things where it's like you either walk away or you don't, right?
Yeah.
But, I think what you're talking about is not just, I mean, the resilience I think comes afterwards when we go, oh, I can have gone through that, and then I can also make it not destroy my life.
Yeah.
Right. I can take the lessons from it. I can do the learning from it. I think resilience is not just in having survived something, but then also figuring out a way to get to the other side of it psychologically and emotionally as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that specific story showed me that there's a lot of knowledge and awareness and wisdom my body has on its own.
Right.
And so today we're going to talk about the ESFP personality. And I think there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom that ESFPs have about the physical world and their physicality. And it's almost unconscious, right? It's like this knowing of going through the world. And it creates some of that resilience because they like, I can handle this. I kind of have an awareness of my body's capabilities. I don't have that. I don't really like, I mean, I guess and I speculate, but I don't do a lot of testing and verifying that in the world. And this verified it for me that my body's got more capacity than maybe I thought. And I think that's something like I can learn a lot from ESFPs in particular, right? And probably ESTPs, anyone that has extroverted sensing or sensation in their cognition can probably teach us a lot about resilience and a lot about our physical abilities. And I think that's what the Olympics are. They're kind of this showcase of what humans have potential for physically.
Yeah.
Like breaking the 4-minute mile. Like, wow, look at what humans can do. Like, look at that ski jump. Oh my God, that guy's like, hundreds of feet in the air on the side of this mountain, flying through open space on skis, and he lands it.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing kind of things, right?
Yeah.
So this all teaches us the resilience we have in a physical world.
Well, and when a person does that, you're seeing the result of about 4 billion crashes.
Yeah.
And getting up and
There you
dusting
go.
themselves off. Right.
Yeah.
Like we get to watch the
Resilience.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reps.
So it's a matter of and I think Mike, were you pointing to was that a Green Bay Packers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Football is massively a game of resilience.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do is get up and dust yourself off and get back into formation, right?
Yeah.
Over and over and over again.
Like the Cleveland Browns keep showing up every season, no matter how many times they lose. They're still resilient.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, how heartbreaking for the Browns fans. You only get to say that because you're a Steelers fan. Yeah. And that's cheap shots.
There you go.
But
Easy ones though.
So we're talking about ESFPs. It's not just, it's so easy to have the conversation go towards something physical when we're talking about
Exactly.
ESP types.
Exactly.
There's a resilience ESFPs have beyond that though.
Oh, yes.
It can show up physically because that's one of the most impressive outputs. Like that's when I see somebody at the top of their form and they have extroverted sensing and they've chosen to apply it to physical pursuits, it's almost always a thing of wonder.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to point to that component. But I also think that ESFPs have a resilience that's also around the emotional resilience. Like there's a heart to it. And if you're going to, when you look at things like the Olympics, you think of it as just being physically, resilient or physically ambitious. But the amount of disappointment that you have to navigate through. Like how many times did you lose in order to have that one win? How many times did you fall in order to get the perfect landing? How many times, there's a heart to it that you also have to show a strong amount of resilience for. And I think that same resilience can be applied to life circumstances.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if this particular clip, because I didn't watch it all the way through, but this particular clip talks about a friend of mine who is going through a time period of resilience that isn't, she has ESFP preferences, and it doesn't have to do with physical resilience, although it is that too. It requires a lot of stamina from her, but it's it's a resilience that lives based on stamina, like a realism combined with an optimism at the same time that I think is really impressive, and it's something that I think other types can learn from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a groundedness.
Mhm.
So let's I actually kind of want to go to that clip now. Let's go ahead and go to this
So that we
clip.
don't burn it all by talking about it.
Let's
which
go
I
to
think we
this
probably
clip.
just did.
What we're going to do is we're going to do this clip. Stay tuned though, because right afterward, we're going to start our Quest membership conversations. We are going to open up a conceptual conversation about this. We're going to go into some breakout rooms so everyone in the Quest membership gets to share. Then we're going to go a little deeper. We're going to journal about how it applies to ourselves. And then we're going to find something in our world to go test out, a quest to go on, maybe to learn something or do some kind of action in the outer world. We're going to get to that at the end of this membership. You should join us, personalityhacker.com/quest. Love to have you be part of that entire experience. And we will be right back after this.
ESFPs, extroverted sensing, sensation. The challenge with this is there's not a lot of outlet for it in our modern world. There's not a lot of need for it, like in a real pragmatic way. We often will channel into things like sports or meditation or yoga, or it usually has to have some discipline. It's not like you're out climbing trees with this energy as much. Kids that have it do, but we don't, as a culture, we don't like climb trees as a culture anymore. Kids aren't out climbing trees. They're in their bedrooms on TikTok, like all kids. But all kids used to climb trees 50, 60 years ago.
Right.
So this energy is no longer like, my children, they lived in Baltimore City. They didn't get to go out to recess during their grade school years. Like they didn't have any extroverted sensing involvement. So the one thing is it's really easy to let this slide because there's no cultural place where this goes except for sports or proper, like really channeled, pointed things. There's no like just general expression of this anymore that our culture has. So if you're not a sports person and this is your dominant function, you don't have a place to channel it like that is appropriate culturally. It's easy to go, well, I guess I'll just indulge then. There's nowhere for it to go, so I'll just indulge. But I think that is not having good expectations for yourself. Mm-hmm. Like good expectations for somebody that leads with sensation is, well, if the culture doesn't provide for it, that means I have to provide for it because that's my hero of myself showing up to the world. I'm going to go ahead and be the hero of my own story. And I'm going to deliberately step into this energy, even though maybe I'm not wired for the way the culture wants me to go with it because it's got a very particular way. I'm not going to be a first responder. I'm not going to be a sports person. I'm going to divert into whatever interests me, but execute on it, take control of it. So I think indulgence is probably the biggest thing that can hijack this for an ESFP, this part of them.
Yep.
And it can ruin the expectation you can have for yourself here.
Yeah.
So what is the proper, like, how is there a way an ESFP can think about this? Like, that seems very abstract, Joel. Land that more tangibly. Like, how can an ESFP that's listening right now go, okay, I want to self-love. How do I tune into this energy and actually apply it to myself so I can show my self-love?
I think what you just mentioned is so dead on. A lot of times it's giving themselves permission to show up more expressive. You even mentioned, like, well, culture doesn't really have a need for this as much. I actually think culture has a massive growing need. And I know what you're saying is that
but they don't signal they have the need.
They don't signal they have the need. That's right. And in times past, we had way more obvious need for this because, like we caught our own food and we lived a more present life. And we had, there were so many more
things, opportunities
for this function to really shine. And now, like you said, it's a little bit more compartmentalized. And it's like, okay, cool, but I'm not into parkour. Maybe I'm like in my 70s now and I'm an ESFP. What am I supposed to do? And the first thing is give yourself permission to have that expressive part of you come out in whatever way makes sense to you or whatever way captures your fancy. That can be a free-spirited nature, right? That can be somebody who tries out lots of different things and gives yourself permission to do that. It could be somebody who leaves a situation that's bad for you, even though everybody else says that it's irresponsible. It could be like, no, I'm gonna allow myself to take a new opportunity. I'm gonna allow myself to get into action when it makes sense for me to get into action and express myself physically. Maybe I do want to climb a tree, right? Like maybe it's letting other people climb trees and go and championing other people, maybe children's desire for free play. And it's like, well, no, that's unsafe. And it's like, maybe it's your job to go, well, no, they need that. They need a moment of that. So it's, in some ways, it's like championing the function itself. It's understanding its importance in society, even if society pushes back and goes, well, we don't need that. And it's like, the hell you don't need it. Of course you need it. In fact, it's missing so much right now. And we do, as a culture, like you said, we tend to indulge it too. We indulge it through, sometimes we'll indulge it with food, right? Well, I want the sensory experience of eating. So maybe I might be doing too much eating. Well, you could turn that around and maybe start learning how to cook, right? And so as opposed to just being a consumer and, quote unquote, feeding this part of you, maybe you're creating with this part of you.
Yeah.
And so whatever it is that you tend to indulge, can you transfer that as just a consumption frame, an indulgent consumption frame, and more be a creative, expressive frame? And, and most people who have ESFP preferences, they know the things that are interesting to them. They know what they like, right? And so it's a matter of giving yourself permission to fully express that.
Yeah. So if you're an ESFP or you have an ESFP personality in your life, this idea of your driver, if you're ESFP, the sensation process, this is something that, man, you cannot ignore. It is so much a part of you. If you're at a context that tells you it's bad and wrong, you need to really look at that context, right? If you're in a situation where you have to sit down and learn and it's just not your style, you'd rather be up learning hands-on, that's how you're wired. You're supposed to be in a more hands-on learning environment. You're going to always struggle with, if this is how you're wired, you're going to most likely always struggle with just sitting still and learning from a book You are designed to be up and active and engaging with your real world environment.
Yep.
That's how you're designed as an ESFP.
Well, and if you've got a job that forces you into, say, a cubicle or you're sitting all day, I'm not necessarily suggesting that you quit your job, although that might be something you've been ruminating on and go, like, maybe I do need to do that and find something that's a little more active. I'm not necessarily suggesting that, though. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you are, overly sitting or, like bound to a chair, then give yourself permission to have very active hobbies. Give yourself permission to go do things that are like pique your interest, that you don't just go, well, maybe I'll join the class later, or maybe like procrastination is the worst thing an ESFP can do.
Direct action.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So showing self-love with this part of yourself as an ESFP, we talked about direct action. We talked about giving yourself permission to put things on terms that make sense to you, how you move through the world. Maybe not just letting indulgence happen, but keep your eye or finger on the pulse of, okay, am I actively doing something or am I passively allowing my indulgences to come up?
Right. Am I creating things or am I just consuming them?
And so those are some proper, what we would encourage after doing years of coaching. We're not telling you what to do, but we are saying those are probably those are good expectations to have for yourself as an ESFP for your driver or dominant process. How can other people tune into and learn from specifically the ESFP's path of self-love? In other words, if I was to watch an ESFP go down the road of self-love and I watch them do the things that are going to set themselves up and I'm like, wow, they really love themselves. I have different wiring and different cognition. And so the other 15 types, what can we learn from this? How can we look at an ESFP? I think it's a great conversation starter. What do I learn from watching an ESFP show self-love?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when an ESFP is developed, gives themselves permission to be themselves, when they model self-acceptance and self-love, there are so many amazing traits and qualities and characteristics that come along with this type in that situation. Some of the easy and obvious ones, I mean, if you're familiar with type and you're familiar with this personality type and specifically, they're known for being adaptable. They're known for having a sense of presence, right? And joy and fun. They're known to be optimistic and have passionate enthusiasm for the things that they're into.
Yeah.
They're also known for kind of getting things done a lot of times, right? Because they're very direct and they go, okay, that's the thing that needs to get done. I need to jump into action and make it happen.
Direct action.
Direct action. That's right. So there's a lot of things about this type that are very inspiring, but I think one of the things that I really take away is how much resilience this type has.
Yeah.
When an ESFP loves themselves and serves themselves, it's amazing how resilient they are. And it's a combination of realism and optimism. So they are realistic in that when a situation goes down, when something that is a major challenge that requires resilience goes down in the world, the first thing is that they are pretty quick to accept it, right? They don't go into whining a lot of times. They don't go into like beating themselves up and others. They don't there's
they're not trying to reframe it and say, well, I'm not really seeing the right perspective. Maybe it's like this. And they don't spend time second guessing.
That's right. So they just go, okay, this is the situation I'm dealing with. So they're just realistic about it. And then they're realistic about solving it. So they choose practical solutions to deal with the issue. And at the same time, they also have an optimism about them, which says that it's not like it's all disastrous. It's all going to fall apart. It's like, why do I even try? They go, nope, I'm going to keep my head up. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to assume it's going to turn out in the end. We have an ESFP who's been in our community. She was a student of Profire training quite a few years ago. And I've been following her Instagram where her baby, when she was born, just a few months into her life, discovered that she had massive, one of her organs was basically failing. And she, like any other time period in history, she would have died. And so they had to first, she's like a newborn. They have to wait to see if there's an organ donor. They had to deal with a baby going through an organ transplant. They had to go through all of the different challenges that come along with that. Infections, challenges with eating. Like there was just so many different things. And her baby just recently turned 2 years old. And just watching her journey has been so inspiring. Like, I'm sure she went through hell. I'm sure that whole situation was hell. There were many times that they weren't sure if her baby was going to survive. There were many situations in which there were sleepless nights.
Yeah.
They were having a great time, and then all of a sudden her daughter ended up back in the hospital for a couple weeks. I mean, it was so demoralizing, such a hit after hit after hit. And my goodness, was she resilient. She just wasn't going to let anything get in her way. And she was optimistic, but at the same time, you could tell she was exhausted. But she just kept going, right? She was realistic and optimistic. And her baby just turned 2. She's in a great place. Fingers crossed it's going to keep going. But no matter how it had turned out, I know that this person, the mom, I know she could get through anything.
Yeah.
I know she can get through anything. I found that so inspiring. So I think when an ESFP really loves themselves and really models what that looks like, cares for themselves, does what's in their own best interest, I think that they can have a resilience that's just awe-inspiring to others.
Absolutely. So again, if you're an ESFP listening right now, or you have somebody that's ESFP preferences in your life, these are some frameworks and avenues for self-love. We think that every personality type has an access point with the personality that they are wired with to tune to the self and use it as a framework to show yourself love and be there for the person that you have to go through this entire life with. From beginning to end, it's going to be you. And loving yourself is certainly an avenue for joy and happiness and positivity in life. And I think we want to encourage people toward that. It's often our work and our coaching and all these programs. I would encourage you, if you don't have one of our owner's manuals for ESFP and your ESFP, this can be very powerful because we walk through that car model in much more detail. We show you how to get in flow state with your driver process. We show you what happens when you get into a loop with the driver and the 10-year-old, how you get gripped by that perspectives process. That little pesky perspectives can sometimes grip you. But then we talk about some of the solutions for this, that parent energy of the authenticity. That could be a translator between some of the best parts of you and some of the more challenging parts of you. It really wants to show up and parent you. And so in that owner's manual, we really talk about how to do that. Like, what does that actually look like? What do I do? What are the actions I can take? How do I think about it? How do I actually execute on this in my life to show myself self-love and to get on the path that I want, all those kinds of things. So I would really encourage that. I think that would really help you if you're an ESFP. We also have some other resources and podcasts you can also listen to on our website for your type.
Yeah. I just want to do a quick reminder. I know that we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
I just want to do a quick reminder that, and we said this in the first episode, and I'm probably going to say it. One of us will probably say it in every episode going forward in this series.
Forever. Oh, just the series.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love is not earned.
Yeah.
Right. Love is given and received freely. So in the conversation around self-love, doing these things will not earn you love. But sometimes we have obstacles and impediment between ourselves and our ability to feel the love that we're trying to always be sending to who we are, right?
Yeah.
So this is a path to self-love. It's a path to self-appreciation, because you'll be removing some of those impediments. You'll be removing too high of expectation in areas that you might need to have more reasonable expectations. It'll remove the impediment of feeling like you could be doing more, right? Because you'll know the areas where you can be doing more and it's rewarding to do more. It'll remove the challenge of feeling like, oh, nobody cares. Well, when you start watching yourself contribute and start watching people care, that boosts up it removes that obstacle so that you can get that free flow of love. So when we say how to fall in love with yourself, or how to self-love, how to fall in love with your ESFP personality as a way to access love for yourself, remember that love is always flowing. These are just strategies to remove the impediments you have to feeling it.
All right, welcome back to Personality Quest. Joel Mark Witt with Antonia Dodge, Jonathan Harden. Producing today is Karina Gunyon. And we are in the midst of talking about the ESFP personality type, and not just the ESFP personality type in general. How does an ESFP love their personality type? How do they fall in love with themselves using their personality type as an access point? And then we talk about, well, there's 15 other types. What can we learn from an ESFP being tuned into themselves? When they use their cognition, they understand themselves through the lens of their personality and fall in love with who they are. what can we learn from that as other people? So that's what we're talking about today. And we're really glad that we have our Quest membership group gathered together for this discussion. We're going to open up some of those, broader conversation here, and we're going to go deeper in just a little bit. So what's coming up for you, Antonia and Jonathan, as we talk about ESFPs and what we can learn from them? Anything?
I have a friend who I believe he's ESFP. I haven't profiled him, but it's just been passively watching him and getting feedback from his answers about life. He has cerebral palsy and is a rock climbing instructor and a lifeguard. And I was just thinking, I was like, by some body standards, he's not fit to compete in lifeguard training at all. But he can do all of the things. He can go underwater. He can lift the brick. He can pull someone out. He can do all these things. And he trained me one time, and I thought, like, wait, if he can do it, I can do it. Like, if he can balance on the beam, he's got all these physical limitations stacked up against him, but he just sets the standards like, oh, it's very easy. Just do it like this. And he'll actually show you how to pull someone out of the pool, and he'll show you how to, like, balance on a beam 100 feet up in the air without falling or anything. And it's really amazing to watch, but and he doesn't actually think about it. He just does it. And so it was a really good example. And it's a good presence in my life of just someone who is always present. And it's fun to talk intuitive, but sometimes it's nice for me to just remember to, like, let's get something done. Let's create something together as friends. So
Yeah.
I just kept thinking about him the whole time we were talking.
Yeah. I think it's very common for us in the type world to not have high appreciation for certain personality types. And I think ESFPs end up getting sort of the short end of the stick in the type world. We have it's not uncommon for people to have a very specific image in their mind about what an ESFP is and not allow for very much variance. But I think that there's actually of all of the types that are mistyped in these communities, I think that there is probably a surprising amount of ESFPs that believe that they're different types, because we do not do a good job of communicating this type, right? And all the different ways that it can show up and express. And one thing that I noticed, though, no matter how the person's showing up, I know ESFPs that are like compliance officers. Our business manager has ESFP preferences, and she just blows everybody out of the water with, like, how much she's capable of doing and how much she can track, and, like, just she's so amazingly competent. And I think we have a tendency to conflate extroverted sensing specifically with physical acumen. But I love the idea of talking about it in terms of resilience, because that's the one thing I've seen as the constant with this personality type, no matter what, is that there's just this high degree of, like, the resilience comes from the practical direct action that just like not making it overcomplicated. Now, I know every ESFP I've ever profiled talks about how they overthink, which is not something that a person would necessarily identify with that type. But there is a component of them, like they have a little INTJ living inside, that has a tendency to do some overthinking. And when they're in an overthinking space, they can feel that they're not at their best when they're taking direct action, and they're meeting the world without overcomplicating it. The things that they're capable of doing, that doesn't mean that they can't think. It doesn't mean that there's, like, and in fact, our business manager, Ines, she's always giving us these amazing ideas that she's been stewing on and baking up. And she's the one person where it's like, should we do this? She's like, let's think about it, right? Like, what's the long-term rollout of this? So there's that component too, the personality type. And that direct action taking, though, is the part that ends up creating so much impressiveness, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's where the resilience comes, that combination of optimism with practicality, right?
Yeah. There's some ESFPs that are able to reframe optimistically no matter what. I don't always know if it's healthy or not. I think of it's like the SpongeBob effect. Like, I've seen SpongeBob episodes where, like, and I don't know if he's an ESFP, but it's like, that's the kind of the energy I imagine this type of ESFP that's able to, like, There's that one episode where he thinks he's going to summer camp, him and Patrick, and they actually end up in like some like work prison or something. And all the prison guards are trying to make their life miserable. And they like, he just keeps reinterpreting everything like in the best light possible. And he's just like, yeah, like this is super fun. And like the prison guards can't like make his life miserable. He won't allow it. He keeps reframing to the positive and just letting everything roll off his back.
Mhm.
There's a lot of ESFP energy sometimes. It reminds me of that. It's
Mhm.
like throw anything at me. I'll just pivot. I'll reframe it. Like I'll just meet it where it's at. I'll take it for what it is, and I'll somehow make it a good thing.
Mhm.
And that, I don't know what that is, and I don't know if all ESFPs have that. But that is beautiful. That's
Yeah.
like a wonderful aspect. And I've seen a lot of ESFPs. I mean, it's not to the degree of SpongeBob, obviously. That's like a caricature of it. But there is something to ESFPs that they have. There's something qualitatively about this. I think that's where that resilience comes from. It's like being able to take anything in and make it good. A key to it.
Mhm.
Have you
Yeah.
noticed this? You've seen ESFPs do this, or am I the only one that's noticed this?
Yeah, I think that's why it's important. I mean, I like the words optimism and realism, and I wonder
Yeah.
too sometimes if ESFPs are so acutely aware of limitations that sometimes that can be a little bit of a drag, and so you can go to just reframing everything to almost like refresh the browser like every 5 seconds in order
Yeah.
to just stay optimistic, because sometimes the limitations are just, oh, the future is so bleak and dark and I don't want to look down the tunnel, so I'm just going to keep reframing this every 5 seconds just to have like something fresh and new in front of my face that I could be present with. And
Yeah.
right there, I guess my heart's breaking a little bit. I was like, I want to say like, it's going to be okay. The future is going to be fine. Like we're going to make it through it together. Don't worry. Because sometimes
Yeah.
if you take a hit and all you have is the present moment, that hit in the moment,
Right.
if it's dark, oh, like you can't future pace at all. And if your best future pacing is uncertain, that I just want to give him a hug at that moment and say it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
The caricature of SpongeBob shows like kind of an extreme example of that ability to find the best in things. I want to make sure that we communicate that doesn't mean that they don't have problems
Of course not.
or can't be depressed
Yeah.
or like can't go through some really serious stuff that they have to really contend with or find themselves in a really low place. Everybody's human and everybody goes through the spectrum of human emotions.
Yes.
And so I think it's important to make sure that we clarify that the impressive resilience isn't because they lack that depth or that ability to experience the darkest that, like the hard times that a human can go through. The resilience is made more impressive by the fact that they go through all of that too, right? Like it's not like they're not,
Oh yeah,
that they only have like a certain happy slice of reality that they, like that would be a fantasist. That wouldn't actually be a realist.
yeah.
And that's what's so impressive about people of this type is that they are realists, right? There is like a realism that comes along with it, a practical realism.
Yeah.
And so the resilience comes from feeling all of that, but still managing to find a way. In fact, to a point where one of the things I've discovered that will get an ESFP almost every time if I'm hanging out with somebody who's new that I suspect has ESFP preferences, one of the things I'll say to them is you're much deeper than you let people know.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're the good time. You feel like it's your job to be a good time. And you are much deeper than people realize.
Yeah.
And almost every single time they'll go, oh, how did you know? Right. And it's just like, it sucks them in because that deeper part, that part that contends with deeper things and thinks about things deeper. And like, it's very easy for them to, all of us, when we're deep people, we get it knocked out of our hand all the time where we just go, well, I guess I don't get to fit in with society. But if you've got a component of yourself that's very like society loves that part, and then you show the deep part and they knock that out of your hand, it's very easy to just default. Well, I guess I'll just show up as the part that society wants from me. I guess I'll just be that person. And then there's this element that never gets seen.
Yeah.
And so when somebody with ESFP preferences has that part of them seen, they very much light up. But that's part of the resilience too, right? Is being willing to, to not put that on other people.
Yeah.
To just keep it for themselves and go, well, I guess I just have to have this part for just me.
Yeah. And I think there's, I appreciate you saying that. I don't mean to say that I don't want to reduce a personality type down to a cartoon character on Nickelodeon.
Right.
That's not my intention. It was just illustrative to say that there is a part of ESFPs that have this kind of roll off the back, and it's actually not just dismissive. It's being able to actually accept what it is in that realistic way. and interpret it in a positive. That's what I think is really, they meet it where it is. Now, maybe you could argue that SpongeBob's not really meeting reality where it is. He was so perceptively skewing what he was, engaged with. Maybe that's where you're having some umbrage. It's the intentionality of it though. And I've seen, and to your point too, Antonia, I've seen ESFPs be extremely deep, go into really dark, heavy places, like both in helping people and even in their own lives. Like it's not just one note. I was just saying that's one of the aspects. That's one of the things I've learned from them.
Yeah.
I've been around them my whole life. I grew up in a very extroverted sensation environment. Most of my family has these preferences, right? Whether ISFP, ESFP, ESTP. There's a lot of my cousins and my brother and like a lot of family members. And I used to have a better ability when I was in that ecosystem of bringing things in and kind of akitoing them like, it'll be okay. And now I don't have as much availability to that.
Yeah, because you're hanging out with me.
I'm hanging out with like intuitives and we're all like, it's all going to be terrible. Like, it's like whatever. So I kind of miss being around that energy. Yeah. So in that vein, I think, by the way, welcome to some of our new Quest members here on the private Quest call. And if you're watching live streams, we're going to kill the stream in just a minute to go deeper into the private Quest membership. But that idea of kind of being around that energy, like I look in my life and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm around that energy. It really helps me like bring things in and then make them more positive. That's what I learned from being around ESFP energy. So let's go into breakout rooms now. Let's put 12 minutes on the clock. Let's go into our Quest discussion. We kind of opened this up conceptually about ESFP energy, but let's talk about the ESFP influences in your life. As you go in your breakout room, the Quest members here with 2 or 3 other people, let's talk a little about, and it doesn't have to be a person. It could be people, but it could also be the organizations you're a part of. Maybe you're a part of an organization that has ESFP energy with it. Or maybe there's activities that you do, you're not an ESFP, that you do that are kind of ESFP energy. Like this energy itself, ESFP energy. And maybe we could give some qualitative nature to that if somebody's maybe uninitiated. But what does that maybe look like, Antonia? Maybe you could speak to that.
I think we've been talking about it.
But yeah, I think the metrics, like what, or Jonathan, yeah.
Whereas, I mean, sometimes I think that's why we reached to SpongeBob, because it's still like a representation of that energy. And sometimes that's a great place to start. I mean, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is a good example, I think, of ISFJ or ISTJ energy. That might be a place where I start and just to begin to understand and appreciate that energy. It's not where you want to stay. Yeah. But I think, sometimes it is TV shows that comforts us and brings us positivity. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's open up. Karina, producer, would you be willing to open up these rooms? We'll put 12 minutes on the clock. We're going to come back and we're going to go deeper after this and some journaling and some Quest for the week to see what we can apply this toward in our week this coming up. So if you've been listening along on the live streams, you're part of Personality Quest right now. We're going to be ending, myself and Antonia are going to be ending the live stream in just a little bit here to go deeper into our Quest membership. It's a growing membership every week. We'd love you to be part of it. personalityhacker.com/quest. Every week we come together and we watch just a short clip from the Personality Hacker podcast to open up a concept for the week. We're right now in the middle of a series we're going to be doing for the next 15 weeks, tuning into every single personality type, all 16 of them. This week we're talking about ESFPs. We're going to look to them to see what they can do to be more engaged in self-love. So how to love yourself as an ESFP was the title of this week's episode. We tuned into how can ESFP love themselves using the framework of personality type. And then what can we, the other 15 types that aren't ESFP, what can we learn from that? How can we apply it to our lives? So that's what we've been talking about this week. And we're going to just keep rolling along through so if you want to learn personality types, or if you want to tune into how to do self-love, whether it's your type or somebody else's, I think it's gonna be a great series you should be a part of. Yeah. And I'm glad we started with ESFPs because again, it's very easy to take this type for granted. Yes. And it's very easy to oversimplify all the ways that they can show up. And so I wanted to start with this personality type to tap into how important it is to find appreciation, particularly if you're into personality and into personality types and find a dearth of quality information around ESFPs. That's very common. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and head off to our Quest membership. Thank you for joining us on this live stream. This is just the very beginning, very starting point of all of this. There's so much more in our Quest membership, not just on these live calls, but we're also adding into our catalog of trainings and programs. So if you're part of Quest membership, we're going to be continuing to add content into the membership platform as well for you to be able to engage. We just did a deep dive just a few days ago where we recorded that. That's going to be part of the catalog. So we'd love for you to be part of this membership of growing like minds here around personality types and personal growth. And we hope to see you on the next Personality Quest. You should be a member next week. personalityhacker.com/.